is the year 490 BC, and the final battle between the Greeks and the Persians in the First Greco Persian War has begun. So basically, the First Greco Persian War started because Athens and Eritrea decided to support the Ionian Revolt. Now, we will cover the Ionian Revolt in later videos, inshallah. But skip a couple of years later, and the Ionian Revolt gets crushed by the Persians. And Athens and Eritrea are like, schnutz, we messed up. So Darius the First, also known as Darius the Great, yeah, that's the Darius. Now, the Darius the First, he wasn't really at the Battle of Marathon. The stuff, yeah, don't learn history from the movies, especially like 300 and 300 Rise of an Empire. So basically, Darius the Great was like, nah. And he was like, alright, it's time to punish Athens and Eritrea for their involvement in the Ionian Revolt. And also use them as an excuse to invade Greece. So basically, he sent his admiral, Datis, and his nephew, Artaphernes, to invade Greece. On their way, when they were crossing the Aegean Sea, they attacked the island of Naxos, and after a brutal siege, they were able to take the island, the fortress, and over a couple of days, they took the rest of the Cyclid Islands. Then they headed north to Eritrea, and after a 5-day siege, Eritrea was betrayed by a group of its own nobles who opened the gates for the Persians. The Persians sacked the city, and then they took the population of Eritrea and literally deported it halfway across the world near to their capital in Susa. Like, literally, they took the people and deported them. So that's pretty insane. Alright, so what happened next was that in the Persian army, they also had an Athenian exile. His name was Hippias. Through his advice, they landed at the Bay of Marathon. Now, the Persian army consisted, now this is the modern estimates, because Herodotus, he basically says that, their numbers were like 100,000 or something, but the modern estimates are like from 25,000 to 30,000, and 1,000 horse. So he landed at Marathon. Now, at the same time, the Athenians, they weren't idle. They weren't just sitting down. They were like, hey, yeah, let us get invaded. Nah, these guys were in full panic mode. They were like, alright, let's arm everybody, get the hell out of there, and stop the Persians. And now the Athenians, they sent their entire army. Well, basically, at that time, it was their entire field army. If the hoplites got wrecked, obviously they probably could have raised a bit more men, but then it wouldn't be the same quality and they would have gotten wrecked. So this was, just think of this as their last line of defense. So the Athenians rushed towards Marathon, and they were like, nah, Persians, you ain't crossing. And they waited there. Now, the Athenian numbers ranged between, it was basically 10,000. Let's go with 10,000. So 10,000 heavily armored hoplites. Now, they sent word to Sparta, and Sparta was like, thumbs up, bro, we're coming. But here's the tricky thing, they were coming after a religious festival, which was like after 10 days, and the Athenians were like, well, we're gonna die. But never fear, for the Plataeans are here. 1,000 Plataeans came under the command of their general, I guess, Arimnestos. They came to reinforce the Athenians. Now, there was a 5-day stalemate between the Athenians and the Persians. Now, if we think about it, the stalemate literally worked in the favor of Athens, because, lo and behold, every single day the Spartans were coming closer and closer. That's kind of obvious. But then it's unknown what actually broke the stalemate. Some theories say that, well, you see, the horsemen of the Persians, the horses were not present, meaning that either they were foraging or they were being re-embarked on the ships, and those same ships were going around to attack Athens from the sea. It's unknown, but then the fact remains that the horses were not there. Miltiades, seeing his chance, decided to attack, and so a vote was given. The vote was undecided because half of the generals, since Athens as a democracy, they also had the same policy in the military. So Callimachus, he had the last vote, and he voted to attack. So the Athenians marched out. Miltiades was in overall command, and he thinned his center and strengthened his flanks. In the center, Themistocles and Aristides and their troops were located there, while on the right flank was Callimachus, and on the left flank were the Plataeans under the command of Arimnestos. Then they marched forward. Now the center rank was only 4 ranks deep, while the flanks were 8 ranks deep. And as we can see, we'll find out why. Once the Athenians got into bowshot, they broke formation and charged, taking the Persians by surprise. Then they clashed into their front line. Soon, the Athenian center began to buckle and began to be pushed back, while the flanks held on steadily and then slowly and slowly were able to wrap around. Some say the Athenian center broke, but even if it did, it doesn't really matter because it was too little and too late. For the flanks were smashed, and the Persians were in a full rout. They retreated back to the ships and fled. It was said that 6,000 Persians perished in this battle, while only 192 Greeks on the side of the Athenian and Plataean alliance died. One of them being Callimachus. It was said that he was so pierced by spears that even though he was dead, he was standing upright. But then the Athenian and Plataean army could not just sit around and relax. For even though they won a battle, they still had to reach Athens to stop the Persian fleet from attacking Athens. So they marched. However, before they set off, they sent a runner named Phidippides, as legend has it, who ran all the way to Athens from Marathon and screamed, "Nike!" And then he fell and died from exhaustion. This is said to have inspired the marathon races. As the Athenians reached Athens, and Plataeans, as they reached Athens, the Persians were about to disembark, but when they saw the Athenian and Plataean army, they sailed away. This was a glorious victory for Athens. But while the Athenians and Plataeans celebrated their great and miraculous victory, somewhere deep in the Persian Empire, an emperor passed away and a new one was crowned king. Xerxes will have his revenge.